Welcome to the Oracle Mobile Application Framework YouTube channel. In this episode, I talk about device integration in your mobile application development. These days, there isn't much that you cannot do on a tablet or on a mobile device in general, like a smartphone. However, there's a lot that you can do only on those devices because of the different integration capabilities that mobile devices have compared to a laptop or to a PC. To make optimal use of those functionality, we need to have a better understanding, first of all, about the device and about how to access these functionalities of the device. And this is all what device integration is about. So let's start with knowing about the device. Mobile is a lot more different than on a laptop. Laptops, PC almost have similar specs or the same spec even, so that when you build an application that runs in a browser, beside of some browser differences, you can be more or less certain that the application always finds the same environment to execute in. Now on the device that is mobile, things are different. We do have different devices, we do have different display sizes, we do have different operation systems, and we do have different capabilities. We even have different browser capabilities depending on the device and how old the device is. And then we don't know if we have access to all of the functionality that we need. What if we don't get access to a camera because the user doesn't give us the permission for that? Or if there is no camera, now if you're on an iPod Touch and if you're on a 16 gig device, then you don't have a camera. If you're on a 32 gig device, then yes, you have a camera. Now if your application needs to run on iPods, on tablets, on the iPhone, on Android devices, and if your application is kind of dependent on device integration functionality, then to avoid problems for the user using your application, you want to be able to hide those functionality that is not supposed to work on the device that the user is on. And for this, you need to understand the user device that you're running on, and you can only do this at runtime. And then network capabilities is another thing that is different from the use on laptops and PCs. Now a laptop and a PC most likely is connected to a local area network or a Wi-Fi, right? Now this has a very good throughput, and in the past when you build applications, of course you were sensible about the amount of data you downloaded to the client, but you expected the client to be very powerful so that an extra bit of data didn't really bother the client. However, on the mobile device, things might be different, and you might be connected to the network, which is 3G, 4G, or the Wi-Fi, or you might be connected to no network, in which case you're not connected at all. Now, offline is something that could happen to users even on the go. So while they're driving in their car, if they do something on your mobile application, and then they're just getting into an area where they don't have network connectivity, they're working offline. And still you have to make sure that in this case of no network availability, your application first of all runs, and second, all of the data that the user is editing or changing actually gets persisted, at least for the time being, so that next time that there is network access, this data can be persisted on the server side as well. And then there is a lot of functionality that you have on a mobile device that you might not have on the laptop. These are applications you want to integrate. These are features, device features you want to integrate, like the camera, as I mentioned, or GPS, or you want to integrate the contact list that a user is maintaining on the local device. Now this kind of integration is something that MAF provides you, and this is what that talk is about. MAF actually is based, purely from the architecture perspective, on the Cordova plugin set. Now Cordova is open source, and that provides us an API to the device, and it exposes this API normally in JavaScript. Now part of this exposure of functionality include device properties, so like the operation system you're on, the device make that you're on, the type, the version, the operation system, and so on. And it also provides us access to SMS and email. It's not that we can directly write emails, but actually we can launch the email client or launch the SMS client. We can work with context, query context, write context, and we could use the camera and the photo library. Now this functionality comes through Cordova, and MAF is leveraging that functionality. And here is an architecture slide that shows you exactly how we do that and what are your options in MAF to work with those functionalities. First of all, we do have Apache Cordova, and this is the access layer that we provide in MAF to the device. And then on top of that, we do have a data control, which is the device data control. We do have implicit expression language objects that will allow you to check device capabilities from expression language, for instance, to show or hide a command button that you have on the user interface. Then we do have a Java API, which is a device manager. Now everything that we surface for expression language and for use with data controls, of course we surface for use with Java as well. And then we do have a JavaScript API, which again MAF wraps the Cordova APIs. And the benefit here is that if there's a change in the underlying Cordova API set, then we fix it in MAF and your application continues working as if there was no change in Cordova at all. And then you use this access path to the device integration to integrate device capabilities in your user interface. Now that could be, as I said, showing or hiding functionality, but it could also to create a form to create new contacts. And this with the data control would be all declarative. So let's have a look at all of the declarative options to access device integration functionality in MAF. In another recording we will look at the programmatic options. So here we just look at the declarative options, which I guess will be the options that probably you will use the most. The first option wasn't really on the architecture list, and the reason here is that the whole thing that I was showing actually was the feature. Now the feature could be constrained by device properties to either show or hide. So I could, for instance, if I have a feature that is built specifically for a tablet and that it uses a bigger screen, I could show that feature whenever my application runs on a tablet, and I could hide it whenever it doesn't. And the same for a feature I would write for a mobile phone, for a smartphone. Or if there is a device like my iPod Touch example that doesn't have a camera, or a user not giving me the permission to access a camera, then I could hide that feature as well. And this is through feature constraints. Use cases, and I mentioned some of them, include different behavior. Now, one is the layout. Coming back to my tablet versus smartphone example. On a tablet I have a very big screen. Now this screen will allow me to align information side by side. I could have a list of employees, I could have a map showing the geolocation of a department, and then I could show additional information dependent on the selection on the list of employees. On a smartphone, for the same functionality, I might decide to go for a multi-page approach, where the user, for getting the same amount of information, would have to navigate through different pages because the screen size is smaller. Now, if I can detect that functionality, and I can in MAF through device properties, then I can hide or show a feature. And you know, the feature is the core element in the architecture of MAF, and for that reason it's a very powerful functionality that we're introducing here. I could also show some of the features to authenticated users only. So whenever I need to have someone responsible for an action, if there's data changes that I need to track and trace who did that, then of course I cannot show it without the user being authenticated. Now here I can show or hide the feature again using a constraint dependent on, this time not device properties, but the authentication state, so security. And then I can also show Some of the functionality dependent on what the device is providing. Now here's the contact lookup, but I mentioned the camera functionality already, so let's skip to the next slide. Here is a screenshot of the maf-feature.xml file, and this is where you design features or define features in, and the features then can be reused. And you can configure features, and one of the configurations is the constraint, which is basically saying when to show the feature and when to hide the feature. You can use this for adaptive design in MAF, in that you say, okay, I want to tailor a specific feature for a specific device or a specific screen size, and if that is not given on the device the user runs, then I show a different feature. So I can use that here. And to do that, you go to the constraints, and then for the individual feature, you hit the green plus icon, and that brings up a dialog, and the dialog gives you a list of options of what device properties you can access. Now, I just gave you the example of the camera, so let's go with the camera. So I scroll down and I search the entry for where the device tells me whether or not it has a camera, and if that returns true, then I want this feature to be shown. Otherwise, I want to hide that feature, which also means that this feature wouldn't show on the springboard. So the people actually wouldn't even see what they cannot use. However, there is more to do than that. So this is just on the feature level. Now on the feature level, where I either show or hide, that's one use case. The other use case is where in my application I want to make use out of that functionality. For instance, I want to send an SMS from my application, or I want to look up a contact from my application. And for this we do have a device data control. And device data control, as I mentioned in a previous recording where I talked about data controls, it's something that you have on board in MAF out of the box. It's configured in the application controller project, and it's available to all of the features that you need device integration functionality. And you can use this for drag and drop. It's a code-free integration because it's drag and drop. However, as I mentioned, and we show that in the next recording, there is a code integration to device functionality as well. This is all about declarative in this recording, so we continue with the declarative work. Here is a screenshot that actually shows you how the data control, the device data control, looks in the data control panel. You see the structure of functionality. Here it's just a flat mentioning of features exposed through the Cordova API. So I can send an SMS, I can take a picture, I can access to the contacts, and if I expand one of these nodes, then I get additional information, like for instance the parameter that it will expect me to provide when I call that functionality. However, this is also what MAF then can work with when it comes to declarative development. So let's have an example here. So if I take the find contact method and just drag and drop this onto a mobile page, what happens then is that MAF will recognize, oh, this is a method that could take arguments. So the two possibilities here are that either you want a parameter form, or you want to provide programmatically the input arguments, so I'll give you a command button. And for this, it opens up a dialog, and you select from it, and then once you select that, it will generate all of the page source that would be required to have a functional search form. And in addition to that, if it detects that there's a specific permission, device permission required, like in this case, where if I want to search in contacts, I need to have the privilege to access the device contact list, it will pop up a dialog. Setting this dialog will not grant the privilege here. What it will do is, for the feature, it will mark the feature, flag the feature as requiring contact information, or network or camera, whatever you choose. This information actually goes into the maf-feature.xml file. So maf-feature.xml knows all about the individual features. A part of that is the requirement of a feature in regards to privileges. So if I select a feature, if I look then at the list of requirements or permissions I can grant to it, or actually I can request on this level, then one is contact, camera, network. Now I would just say, okay, my feature needs this, that, and this, and that. Why do I need this? On this level? Well, because a feature is a reusable unit in MAF. So that is, I create my feature and I can give it to someone else. And this someone else is assembling the mobile application to deploy it to iOS or Android. And then while assembling it, they would need to know, now what are the feature permissions requirements in regards to device integration. So I'm kind of making a little laundry list of what needs to be granted to this feature so that the feature works as I design it. I mentioned that there is an application assembler. Well, the application assembler, that is whoever takes the feature, puts it into an application configuration file, which is called maf-application.xml, which is the overall assembly file. Usually when you build everything in one workspace, you don't even recognize that there are two configuration steps involved. However, if you import a feature, then you recognize that you have to go to the application the configuration file to add that feature so it shows on the springboard. Now here we do have the maf-application.xml file. It's in a different location than the maf-feature file. It's in the application resources. You expand this and then you find a descriptor node, and there in the descriptor node there's an ADF meta-inf folder, and there you find that file. You double click on that and it will open up in a dialog. And this dialog then also lists all of the privileges and permissions that you can get from a mobile device or on a mobile device, but it will also then list all of the features that you currently have registered that actually request a specific privilege. And then you just put a check mark and grant it that way. So that is that your application now says, yes, we are aware this feature requires that permission and we want that feature to have that permission. And then when the user installs the application, actually they will have to grant that functionality. So here's a continuation of the example with the contact information. So first I had a search form. So the next step would, I want to display the information I get out of the search. And for this I do have another set of parameters, another object that is shown in the device data control for find contacts, which is a collection. Now I take this collection and I drag this onto my page just under the search form I created. And then for instance I choose to have a MAF form or a read-only form, which makes more sense when it comes to the search. And then similar to this, what you see on the screenshot, you will see in the preview in MAF, in the editing environment, at least in JDeveloper, that is a screenshot of JDeveloper, you will see roughly how it would look at runtime. And then you deploy it, you run it, and you can query the contacts, all declarative. So that was the data control. The next is to talk about the implicit expression language objects. I mentioned this is something that you would use to integrate device properties with user interface components. Because user interface components, for instance, have a rendered property. And I can use that rendered property and point it to a device property. And depending on whether or not that device property returns true or false, I show or hide the component. And what you would do with that, first of all, you will be able to evaluate whether the device has specific hardware capabilities or if it will have specific display settings. Again, going back to responsive or the layout or adaptive design. Use cases, as I mentioned, is just to show or hide content, and you would use the rendered property for that. So here's an example where I do have a command button, and this command button, dependent on the device property, like has camera, I want to show or hide. So just putting the example I'm giving you before into a visual example here. So on the rendered property, if I open the property inspector, which is a feature in JDeveloper, one way to look at the configuration of a component, then if I move my mouse to the right of the rendered property attribute, then I see an option to launch the expression builder. And the expression builder gives me access to everything within my MAF application in form of data control bindings in terms of managed beans, but also the device properties. So if I go there, you see that there is a mobile application framework objects node. Now this node actually has then the device properties accessible, and it's called device scope. You can expand this, and then you have different categories there. You have device categories, and you do have a hardware or a screen capability. And now each of these information is something that you can use now declaratively, because as soon as you click on one of the functionalities, like here I clicked on has camera, then it composes an expression language string for that. And this expression language string gets copied into the source code. Now for this page, when I run it in a mobile, on a mobile device, then if the camera is not available to me, that button will be hidden. So here's an overview that I provide you for what capabilities you have and how you can access the functionality. So what you learn out of this is that device properties are not exposed on the data control. And if you think back, yeah, we didn't see it there. So the data control doesn't provide us that functionality. However, expression language will do. On the other side, the data control provides us the ability to send an SMS, to send an email, to create a contact, find contacts or remove contacts even, get a picture and get access to the GPS, even if that access is for you walking around. It just kind of puts needles on the map where you're just to track the path that you went. So that's what the data control can do for you. That is what you cannot do with expression language. Expression language just gives you access to the properties. And we will see this table being extended in the next recording, where we talk about programmatic access to device integration. Thanks for watching this, and I hope to see you for the next recording on this episode about device integration.